Hey folks, thanks for joining me for this episode from the Embellish Pod. If you got here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Hopefully I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists. And if you can't find me on one, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com and I'll get that taken care of. You can also find video versions of this podcast on YouTube. You can find all of my links on Instagram at embellishpod or TikTok with the same handle. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com. It's also a place to pick up these links, episode details, and more. This morning or afternoon, I have Cody Turner from Casey Jones Distillery joining me, and we're going to talk through what they've got going on in Western Kentucky. And I'm very attuned to Western Kentucky because that's where I reside as well. But I'm going to start with a question very, very specifically for you, Cody. Yeah. Now, your alma mater is Western Kentucky University.
That is correct.
Do you ever feel like a liar attending Western Kentucky University knowing that there is another 150 miles to the western border on a 400-mile wide state?
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm quite fond of Western. I actually worked there for several years and ended up teaching there for about 9. I got my MBA there, and it's near and dear to me. So,
yeah, I say that as an esteemed alumnus of Murray State University, which is another university that is far closer to the western border than Western Kentucky is.
We use the word west loosely, aren't we?
Yeah, neither here nor there. And honestly, both of our cities are what Lexington. Well, your city is what Lexington and Louisville would consider Western Kentucky.
Right.
And there's 3 more hours of state west of there, so it's not on you guys. It's those folks from Frankfort. Right. More brand specifically. You work for Casey Jones Distillery, and Casey Jones Distillery is situated in near Hopkinsville, and it has a pretty strong relationship to Land Between the Lakes, which more locally or more colloquially has been known in the past as Between the Rivers. And it's a real contentious place, super colorful past. But the ethos of the brand is sort of tied into that environment. Can you give me kind of like the 2-minute drill on who Casey Jones was, the namesake of the distillery?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's actually me and 2 others are the owners of the distillery. The founders, Peg Hayes and Arlen Casey Jones, as you might surmise or intuit from that, Arlen's grandfather is actually the distillery's namesake. So his grandfather, Casey, was a still builder during Prohibition in the area that you referred to as Land Between the Rivers, now known as Land Between the Lakes. His whole claim to fame is that he made these really unique square pot stills. He was originally a coffin builder by trade. Couldn't read, couldn't write, but it was just an engineering savant and just literally could make anything with his hands. So he built stills, and hundreds of them in the Land Between the Lakes area. As you might imagine, his blessing with his ability to create these fantastic, superior stills actually became a curse. If you're a revenue and you ran across a square pot still, pretty good chance that Casey built that, right? So he was busted for still making twice. Went to Mill Point Penitentiary for that. There's a whole history on that. If one of the viewers are interested or listeners are interested, they should definitely look that up. Mill Point. His second stint out of Mill Point, he decides to hang up his hat. And in a weird turn of events, the federal government, through the forestry department, which held that land in Land Between the Lakes, actually commissioned him to make a still. So I cannot imagine how that conversation went. Probably something like, I swear this is not entrapment, but he did finally cave, and he made a still which ended up going into the visitor center in the LBL area, and it stayed there for years. Well, that visitor center ended up becoming remodeled, I think associated to the tie into the Tennessee Valley Authority, the TVA, the power plant generation, et cetera. And so the still disappeared from that visitor center. And of course, Peg and AJ were aware of this. The still disappears. And so they start calling around and doing some investigation and end up getting in touch with the head of forestry and through paperwork and bureaucracy and blah, blah, blah. end up, proving that this is actually his grandfather's still, and they offered to give it back to AJ. And so, from my understanding, the normally 45-minute drive west to get to the visitor center turned into a 15-minute drive. And what do you do when you have your grandfather's only legally made moonshine still? You start making moonshine. And so that is how we got into the distilling business.
So I can't imagine like this is, the government shows up and says, trust us, we're the police. We want you to do something illegal. Real big concern. And I'm quite sure there's some affidavits that were signed along the way, but the still in and of itself and its shape and construction is pretty unique. And I know you guys have one that you kind of take around with you. I've seen pictures of it at ADI and a handful of places. What do you think? Is there any inherent benefit to that style of a still as opposed to a common pot or a column still?
So let's unpack that for just a minute. Like I said, AJ and Peg came into possession of his grandfather's only legally made still. So they took that to Hopkinsville, to their property, their farmstead, and AJ actually used that still to make his own. So for the first 8 years of our operation, we literally were running on AJ's handmade 140-gallon square pot still. Now, I like to tell people you can write craft on anything, but it didn't get much more craft than that. I mean, this literally handmade piece of equipment. More recently, actually last March in 23, we finished up a $2 million self-funded expansion. And part of that expansion was the purchase, commissioning, engineering, and building of a new industrial grade square pot still. It's a 200-gallon unit. It's called the Grandfather, and it's obviously designated to pay homage to Casey. And that sits alongside its our sister still, the 1,000-gallon hybrid pot column still. So we've got a 1,000-gallon traditional pot with a 4-plate column offset condenser to the right of that. So that's our current facility. As far as advantages and benefits of a square still versus the traditional style. So for Casey in his time, if you look on our website, you can see pictures of AJ's still that he made, as a replica of Casey's. You'll notice that there are handles on both the still body itself, the line arm, and the condenser. And the intent, as Casey designed it 100 years ago, was that if you and I wanted to go out and make moonshine, you could strap the line arm on your back, I could strap the condenser on mine. You could grab a handle on one side of the still, I could grab the handle on the other. We could load that square still in the back of a Model A pickup truck. We could drive off, and we could be making moonshine pretty quick. So it was a portability function. There's also quite a bit, and we don't really get into this too much, unfortunately, but there's actually quite a bit of ingenuity behind the condenser that Casey made. It's actually a double-walled copper condenser, which is very similar to what we use in modern stills today, but he was making that 100 years ago during Prohibition. And again, like I said earlier, it was literally he was a savant. Like he could build stuff. So there were portability was one of the features. It heats a lot quicker. A lot more even heat distribution. The shape of it being that square, it's really more rectangle-ish, but we could prop that up on a rock on either side and build a fire under it, and we'd be ready to go. We also think that you really can't have an agitator in a square still. Agitator to keep the mash moving. So you're always using a sour mash process with one of these square stills. And believe that it sort of seasons the same way a good cast iron skillet would. So we do think there's some truth to that as well. But yeah, some of the distinct advantages of a square pot.
So you mentioned that AJ made a replica of the still by hand. Where did he? I mean, working with copper is not easy, right? There's a ton of folks that are experimenting and trying to make stills and considering what they're doing. Like, how did he have the skills? Is it just like a similar mindset as his grandfather, or did he have some sort of a skill set that allowed him to construct a still in his garage?
If you ask Peg, his wife, she would say it's a old Jones genetic bug. They
It's a
just got to be building something all the time, and that is very much the case with AJ. He's very he's just very skilled with the sands. He's been in construction all his life. I mean,
mhm.
he was laying brick when he was basically a kid. And he's just been working his entire life, and so he's got a lifetime of practice and skill sets that he's developed.
And you mentioned a couple minutes ago, and I want to go back to that about the expansion, the self-funded expansion that you just completed. And then there's a rick house that goes into play. There's a new visitor center. There's a handful of items that kind of come into play. And being local to the distillery myself, we're regularly seeing the advertisements of the events that you guys are hosting. But what does an expansion like what you guys went through mean for a craft brand and distillery like Casey Jones?
Well, I think that we need to make some distinctions here to be very clear, like what that means to us and how. Look, it seems like every day on distillerytrail.com, Dan Schofield runs that. Does a great job at that site. There's a new announcement of some new expansion or a new production facility, and they just seem to be, the news just keeps coming. And what it means for us, just to provide context, I think there's this underlying fear: are we going to lose some of the craftness of our brand? And I can assure you that, particularly in today's environment, $2 million does not get you an industrial grade distillery. Get you pieces of it,
Right.
and our production capacity is 7 times what it was. We're going from 140 gallon to a 1,000 gallon operation. But we're talking about one shift being able to produce about 2.5 barrels worth of bourbon a day. That pales in comparison to some of the macro operations, or they're in a different environment, different economies of scale. You're talking thousands of barrels a day, and we're just not there. So we're still very craft. We're so far removed from that industrial level. I wouldn't even, not even in the same category. So we're all still there. It's all still hands on. It's all still very intimate, and you're going to be greeted when you come to the front porch, and we're going to treat you like the family that you like every time. So that's where we're at.
So it's been almost 10 years I think, was it 10 years this year that Casey Jones has been in existence. What's the idea to start a distillery this far Western Kentucky, right? Because there's not a ton of us out here. There's not a ton of distilling that's happening, at least on a consumer scale. Like there's some industrial distilling that's happening, but
Yeah.
What's the idea here where they're like, hey, aside from we have this still in our garage, how do you make that jump? Because most people don't.
Yeah, no, I really think that was just happenstance. I think it's just because that's where Peg and AJ lived, and that was their farmstead, and that's just how it played out. But I do want to say that we take tremendous pride in being a craft distillery in Western Kentucky. We're a huge, and thanks to everybody's support, we're a huge tourism draw to this area of the state that Kentucky needs some love everywhere, and we're happy to be a part of making that happen. And so it's near and dear to us. We've actually talked a lot about how that's a bit of a differentiator for our story and our brand and our value. And I don't want to share too much of our thinking behind that because we're still developing it, but it's a point of pride for us. And I think something that we want to embrace and share and be a part of our story when we engage with our guests and the people that trust us. So, yeah.
So, and being in Western Kentucky and specifically being in Hopkinsville is a point of pride for you guys. And aside from and I don't want to kind of diminish it, but aside from being sort of a tourist destination, what if you had to say, okay, this is the role of Casey Jones in Western Kentucky beyond tourism? Is it popularizing the idea that bourbon can be made in Western Kentucky, or is it just existence, or what is that?
Oh, you're proverbially hitting the nail right on the head. I mean, and it's why I'm being a little catty before. Like, we're working on building that vision statement, that mission statement, and how we want to articulate it and share it with the world. But it has components that we're working towards. One of them is central to this is this vision of being the leading craft distillery in Western Kentucky, and it really is exactly as you said, trying to popularize that idea that bourbon doesn't have to come from the Golden Triangle. Like it certainly some of the world's best bourbon does. There's no doubt about it. I love everything. We wouldn't be doing what we're doing were it not for the giants that came before us. But we have a story to tell. It's a little bit different, and we're excited to share it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, I'm super on board with this, just based off of my geography. But yeah, right now there's a handful of folks that are sort of playing, and you could make a day of touring distilleries in this end of the state between you guys and a handful of others. If a person were trying to say, I'm going to go to the western end of the state, I'm going to visit Casey Jones, and within an hour and a half, there's at least 3 or 4 other distilleries or whiskey brands that exist. What time of the year is it? The dead of the summer? Is it spring? Is it fall? Is it winter? Or is it all 4?
Oh man, the accountant in me says, "Please come the slow season, please, please, please." But I don't. I mean, let's be real. Kentucky is so incredible for the fact that it has it has proper 4 seasons, and there's something to enjoy and appreciate about each one of them, which is of course what makes our bourbon so damn good. But yeah, we had a little bit of an ice storm here not too long ago, and it made travel a little bit difficult, but it was beautiful. It was. The snow was everywhere,
Mhm.
and you get that pristine blanket of white just everywhere. It's just it's fun. I mean, it doesn't last
Mhm.
long, which is great. We're not in northern Canada, those poor folks with that huge cold snaps like negative
Yep.
40 degrees Celsius up there. So I just can't even imagine.
Right.
But in the
I
summer,
don't want to imagine that.
no, God, no, not interested at all. Bless them. But yeah, I mean, any time of the year, there's always something. Fall is beautiful here. Spring is beautiful here. Summer, it gets hot, properly hot, but it's not Texas, so it's you can
It's gonna
survive
be
it.
humid. That's the one thing you can just tell everybody, and unless you're from the South, you may not understand humidity.
Yes.
I don't think that Texans fully understand humidity either. It's still a little dry out there.
Hey, that
Um,
humidity is important, though.
it's important for us for whiskey, but for folks that are like used to Arizona dry heat, and they
Oh
show up
God,
here
not
and
the
they're
same.
like, wait, this is different.
Yeah.
This is a very, very different
Yeah.
situation. So, Casey Jones is playing within the broader bourbon community as a craft distiller, as a name to be noticed. What would you call the identity or role of Casey Jones within the broader bourbon community within the state or within the nation?
Yeah, so I think we covered the context within the state. I think, and just give you props for seeing that. I mean, that's really where we're at. We want to bring bourbon tourism to Western Kentucky. We want to put Western Kentucky on the map as a formidable player in that space. We do. In the broader context, this has been, I've been on as a partner for the last 2 years, and I've worked with Peg and AJ, the founders, for 4 or 5 now. I don't know. It's been some time, and I've been industry adjacent, industry in, and now like properly as an insider, on the supplier side. It's for something that takes years to produce. This industry feels like it's transforming very rapidly, and I am a firm believer in a few really core principle ideas in business, and one of them is you have to find your USP. What is unique about your brand that you do very well that nobody else does, and we're building towards that. I think we've got a lot of really good components to make that happen. We've got, I think, product that Well, let's put it this way. Are you familiar with Leinenkugel? Right. So Leinenkugel's been in business for over 100. It's been a long time. They've been at this a long time. It's a great brewery. They make fantastic beer. Visited them this summer and, did their tour, got to talk to the staff, and it was fantastic. It was a lovely, lovely visit. Highly recommend. They have their Keystone product now, and it's taken them over 100 years to develop that. And that product is their summer shandy. I mean, they sell volumes of summer shandy above and beyond their other brands. And so, to the degree to which that was intentful or they fell into it, neither here nor there, but they are doing something that's unique. They've got the right mix of beer and lemonade that really the market finds very appealing. Like they found that, right? That's where they're at. And so for Casey Jones, we have similar products, I think, that can play in that space. One of them, for example, is the double barrel cut. I don't know if you're familiar with that brand, but it's actually our moonshine distilled from corn and cane. And it's once barrel aged in a new heavy char, medium toast barrel, just like you would bourbon. And then after it's reached a certain maturity, we'll actually dump that and pour it into one of our used bourbon casks, and we'll finish it for an additional year. And it is such a unique expression. Again, that corn, very similar to corn whiskey that you'd expect, but then the cane brings in this rum experience, and you get a marriage of those two things in a bottle. And it's a really unique product that bridges a lot of palates to, brings whiskey drinkers together, rum drinkers together. And it's fun. It's just absolutely incredible. That might be one of the things that ends up being our, summer shandy. Who knows? And broader brushstrokes, the things that I see happening in the industry that are really big right now, blending is gone from being a faux pas to you really need to have that skill set. Like it's just an important skill set to have as a distillery. So, we've blended batches together of barrels, and we're starting to get into that blending space and play with our mash bills and put together different things to make different expressions and build that skill set, because it seems to be something that the market wants. It's a way that you can create novel expressions without having to wait 8, 10, 20 years for a new barrel cask to mature. Like it lets you play in that space, which is really cool. The market seems to be way okay with sourcing if you're transparent about it. That seems to be a new trend, which brings in some really interesting possibilities for creating expressions across brands and, really embracing like what Barrel Craft Spirits have done, or Penelope's done with Barrel's probably the best example of this. Like Seagrass, for example, it's just a mixture of all of these lovely things to make this great expression that just doesn't taste like anything else like that on the market. And what a runaway success. Again, all with source spirits, and no one cares because they're just transparent about it. And then, the third trend that I see happening is finishing barrels, taking your bourbons, putting them in different casks, Amburana, sherry, PX casks. There's a lot of opportunity there. And I think of those three things from where I'm standing today, I think that we will be able to really excel at that last category in a way that's hyper competitive. And I
So,
can you want.
No, it kind of taking a couple of steps back, and this is my fault more than anything. We're 25-ish minutes in at this point, and we haven't mentioned a single expression other than the double barrel cut that you just talked about. And so, kind of give me the current standard SKUs or product line that's out there that people could be looking for. So
one of the things that I'll say sort of as a precursor that's so great about our expressions is that it's full transparency. I actually have mash bills on the labels. So you're going to see what actually goes into what you're drinking. I actually have barrel information on the labels. I actually have some tasting notes on the labels, which I think we're actually the first distillery to ever do that. And so what I'm attempting to do for you, the consumer, is help you make better choices about what you're spending your hard-earned money and time on. And so our SKUs are really well positioned because you can learn quite a bit about your palate from what we offer. So we start the lineup typically in outside market with our Total Eclipse Moonshine. And this is that 50% corn and 50% cane unaged spirit. And it is, if you like a high-end Blanco tequila, that is exactly what this tastes like. That cane and the corn mimics the sort of vegetal sweetness, velvety softness of a really good Blanco tequila. We actually make Moonaritas with that moonshine, and they're absolutely fantastic. But from there, we get into the barrel cut expressions that we talked about earlier. I mentioned the double barrel cut, which is the twice barrel aged version of that. And that bridges, again, that gap between I like corn whiskey and I like rum. Like it's right in the middle of those two spaces. And it's such a great expression. Then we get into Kentucky's Native, which is, of course, bourbon. And we have 4 bourbon mash bills, which it's a lot for a distillery to carry, but they're all positioned for different palates, and they don't overlap in any way. They're not fighting with each other. So our first mash bill is a white label small batch. And again, I said as a precursor, you can learn about your palate with our expressions. That white label small batch is a 96% corn bourbon. 96.31. You're not going to find anything higher. It's just not out there. Like, this is the highest corn mash bill you're probably going to be able to find. And what's so great about it is corn, of course, is what gives bourbon that sweetness. Rye is what gives you that pepper, the coriander, the burn, right? The bite, the body. So this white label mash bill is like maximizing on this. If you want a sweet bourbon, here's your sweet bourbon, right? So if you're bourbon curious, you're new to the space, you want to try to develop and learn a palate, train your palate, that's where you start. And then from there, our mash bill 2 is the black label Kentucky straight bourbon. That's a much more traditional palate. Now we're talking 80% corn, 16 rye, and 4% malted barley. And it is very analogous to like a Woodford Reserve. Woodford has that candied banana palate to it. This is more banana nut bread and more rye spice and body at the end. And it's just absolutely fantastic. But it teaches you a little bit about your palate. Because if you like that rye spice, oh, well, you've got 16 rye in here. Okay, now that's starting to sort of speak to me. Mash bill 3 is our red label 4-grain wheat. 2 types of corn in this. It's 26.5% bloody butcher corn, the same amount yellow dent corn, 35 wheat, which is a lot of wheat for wheat, and 12% malted barley, which is a lot of malted barley for bourbon. It is... of course, when you drop rye and you're instead using wheat is not a very sweet grain. It's also not a spicy grain. It's soft. It's gentle. It's like oat and bread and, all these lovely flavors. So with that expression, you can find out if you like a wheated bourbon or not. And it's, on the palate, it's honey and herbal sweet tea and that lovely malt finish at the end. It's fantastic. My mouth waters when I talk about it. Then the 4th mash bill is relatively new for us. We launched it Q3 last year. It's our Total Eclipse Bourbon. So it rounds out the line. We started with Total Eclipse Moonshine. We're going to finish off here with Total Eclipse Bourbon. And I only have small batch of this, but it's another 4-grain. So we're now talking 75 corn, 10 wheat, 10 rye, 5 malted barley. It's not a wheated 4-grain. It's not a rye 4-grain. Balanced. And it is so incredibly deliciously complex in all the right ways. Citrus notes up front, pecan note finish, oak tannins in the mid. It's just it's such a great bourbon for when you've got your palate, you know what you like, and you just like sipping bourbon. That's a great sipping bourbon. Yeah. So that's pretty much what a lineup looks like.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of things, and that I mean, having this number of different mash bills and processes is pretty significant for a craft distillery. And then beyond that, you guys do single barrels as well. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
so the mash bill 1, 2, and 3, we have single barrels of all of those expressions. So you can get, if you find you really like that high corn, well, I've got a single barrel of that that's going to be more of that flavor and more robust and more nuanced by the actual barrel that made it. Same thing for the black label, same thing for the wheat.
Yeah, and how how do you guys go about selecting the single barrels that you choose to feature? And I assume they're in distillery, and I say this knowing that I have not been able to make a trip to the distillery since like 2019, 2020, maybe after the pandemic, and so I haven't seen the renovations. I tried to make it all summer last summer, and it just was always some like kid activity or thing that ended up taking my attention and not being able to run down there. But I assume these are for sale in the distillery itself, the single barrels. Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes, and we are starting to get the white label single barrel in market. Uh,
Uh-huh.
Father and Sons did a barrel pick with our wheated single barrels, and I would be surprised if they have any left, but I would highly recommend trying them out. That was such a great pick. But to answer your question on how these things are picked, we on occasion will have an order for or need to make up more small batch product, and in doing so, uh, uh, AJ, myself, we'll get to sample through barrels and we'll see what really works. And on occasion, we'll find a barrel that really it's just a gem, and it doesn't need to be batched. And so we'll set that aside in our notes for a single barrel for the future. Or on occasion, the opposite happens. We need to pick a single barrel. And so we'll go through the exercise of tapping barrels, tasting through barrels, and figuring out what we want to actually release as a single barrel for the gift shop or for an order for distribution.
Hmm. And so you've got a new rick house that opened in 2022, late 2022, I think maybe. Have you already figured out where your honey spots are in there, or you guys, you're gonna have to develop that over time to know like
It's going to take
where the
time.
best locations are?
It's going to take time. Yeah, yeah. We've got about 1,000 barrels in it right now, so and it'll hold about 3,200. So it's going to just take time.
So you've got and this won't be published in time for it, but I'm gonna give you an opportunity to chit chat about it, and then we'll ask about some other stuff. But you have a birthday release that's happening this coming Saturday, and
Yes.
then another one on March the 30th, and then after that you've got some Eclipse bottlings and a summer full of events. Kind of give me the rundown or the idea behind the birthday releases and the Eclipse bottlings.
So one of the things that we did in 22, well, actually, yeah, in 22, we started this Casey's Till Late summer series where we were having a food truck and live music and trying to give locals and something to do and tourists another hour to be able to experience the distillery. Well, in 23, we really amped that up quite a bit and started doing at least one major event every month was the mindset, and trying to make it more bourbon themed and really appealing to our core customer and people who want to be steeped in that, the bourbon culture. Well, for 24, the the signal was so strong on the major events for 23, for 24, like, well, what we really ought to do is let's get our house in order here and let's do planned releases every month. Like let's give people an opportunity to have some of the best of what we could do every month. And so in the context of the broader conversation that we've had, we've talked about blending and that needing to be a skill set that we develop and get really, really good at. And I don't think I've given ourselves enough credit, but the mash bill 2 that I talked about earlier, that's actually a blend of our 9631 bourbon barrels and some 7521 barrels to make that 8016-4. So that's actually a blend that we've been doing for quite some time. The Total Eclipse bourbon, that's a blend between two different barrels to make that small batch version of that particular bourbon. So for the birthday release, for AJ's 67th birthday, we thought, all right, AJ, make a blend. Go pick whatever you want out of the whole, like this is his whole idea. He says, I'm going to pick whatever I want in the whole rick house. I'm going to put together 2 just really special barrels, come up with a ratio, and we're going to do my birthday blend, 67 bottles, and that's it. And so that was the inspiration behind the first birthday blend. And then, of course, Peg, his wife, turned 69 in March. So we're going to do the same thing for her birthday. Like, he's going to come up with a blend for her, and we'll do 69 bottles for her birthday in March. Right behind that is, of course, the eclipse in April 8th is the actual eclipse. So for the 6th, we're going to do a eclipse cut, basically, which is our double barrel, or excuse me, our barrel cut expression, but it's from a barrel that was filled around the eclipse in 2017. So this is one of our oldest barrel cut releases that we're going to do for the eclipse on the 6th. So we're pretty excited about that as well. We'll have our first 5-year-old wheat that will be out. And I haven't told many people this, so I'm excited to be sharing this with you. That'll be out for our first bottle your own bourbon experience in May. So we'll pick an excellent single barrel for that, and we'll dump that barrel and everybody will have an opportunity to actually fill their own bottle for that experience. We've got other releases planned, and I'll just drop this little teaser. Our first 6-year-old white label single barrel bourbon will be for our 10-year anniversary in November. So we've got an action-packed calendar of events, a release every month. Yeah, that's what we're aimed at.
It feels like 24 is a big year for you guys, and honestly, I mean, it makes sense because you should be turning 10 in the 24 calendar year, and so you already touched on the question that I was going to ask around, is there a special release that happens for the 10 year? But
Absolutely.
I think I want to make sure I kind of got this. Your 6-year white label, your first 5-year wheated, 2 blends that are specific for birthdays, plus this 10-year celebration. And you mentioned in there you have a bottle your own experience, right? So kind of tell me about that, because not everybody has that, and how those things are managed can vary from distillery to distillery. So tell me about your bottle your own experience.
Well, we're totally full circle now, because originally one of the questions was, this $2 million expansion, is that going to affect the craft side of the experience? The answer is absolutely not. So we have probably one of the best bottle your own bourbon experiences you could just get your hands on. I mean, if you did any more of the actual experience, I'd have to probably give you a 1099. Like, you get to do all of it, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll do for sure 2 bottle your own bourbon experiences this year. Our first one will be at the end of May, and then we'll for sure have one for our anniversary bourbon harvest in it's the Saturday after Thanksgiving. We'll for sure do those 2. We might also do one around the 4th of July time frame. We're playing with that idea. But let's talk about what that experience actually entails. If you do a bottle your own, of course, we'll have different packages. You can get glassware and some commemorative stuff with it. But the basic premise is this. You'll pay for a bottle. You'll pay for the bottle your own experience, which will be, I think we do them for $10. It's not much, right? You actually get to go to our production line. You will get to fill your bottle from our filling equipment. It is, last time we did this, you had the choice of doing it through the automated filler. You could watch it go through the automated line, which will do the filling for you. It'll cork for you. But the vast preponderance of people wanted to do it the old school way, which I prefer myself. So it's literally an old gravity feed bottle filling station. You put that bottle up and put it up into that nipple and set it down, and there it goes, right? Mm-hmm. So you'll fill. We've got an old school corking machine, like old lever style. You actually get to take your bottle, then you put it on this old labeling machine. It's very, very simple pneumatic labeling machine. You push the foot pedal and it puts the label on for you. Pull that off. walk over to our handmade wooden jig where you set your bottle down. There's another machine that will feed the neck label to you. You take that neck label and you put it on yourself. Then you get to take your shrink wrap, your heat shrink wrap. You put that on top of your bottle. You put it over to the heat tunnel, and then that shrink up over on the cork. And then you'll take it over to a table, and we'll have a sheet laid out for you where you can see, the barrel number, the fill date, the char level, the toast level, and you'll get to write on your label all of those details for your actual bottle. So it's very, I'm going to say it's like, this is what we do in production every day, and you get to experience literally every step of that aspect. So it's quite a bit of fun. Of course, AJ will sign the bottle for you as well. So I didn't mention that.
So, obviously there's a ton of folks that are going to have interest in this. How do we know when we need to book this? Like, what is the communication mechanism? Is this a social media post? Is there a newsletter? Is there an email address? Like, what do I need to know so I am ready to go to give you my money and go schedule this?
Yes. All of the above. So one of the hats that I wear that you can't see here is I take care of quite a bit of the marketing. So I'll put something up. I'll be tons of things that I put on social media. There'll be a Facebook event. I'll be doing organic posts. I'll be doing advertised posts. I'll have a whole landing page on our website. There'll be an event on our website. And then we'll also, and I highly encourage people to join our email newsletter. I send out all the emails to folks. We don't spam. It's just, just here's what the events are, what's happening on the event side of things. But we're on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and you name it, we're there.
Yeah, and I will echo, as a non-brand affiliated individual, your newsletter emails are reasonable in both their volume and content, right? There's no spamminess to it. I think I've been signed up for it as long as it has been, with my personal account, because like I said, there's not a ton of you guys out here in the western reaches of the state, so you always want to kind of understand what's going on. So you have the bottle your own experience. If I want to, visit outside of the bottle your own experience as an individual, what does that look like? Are there tours, or is there an opportunity to kind of book a tour or different types of tours?
Yeah, so we're open 7 days a week, closed for Easter, Turkey Day, and Christmas. We might be closed on Christmas Eve, just depends on how the dates fall, but those are the three official days that we're not allowed to be open. So tours are 15 minutes past every hour. We have a standard type tour at the moment. We're working on coming up with some other experiences. We're really keen on doing that this year. You can actually just show up, or you can book your tours online. It's $10. The tastings, we do those every half hour. Again, you can just show up. We also allow you to book those online ahead of time if you want to reserve a spot. Tastings are $5 right now. What you get to taste 20, it's like 10 cups, and there's 20 plus expressions that you can try from. Probably one of the best value tastings in the entire trail.
That's absolutely for sure. You don't find that, at least not from a volume standpoint, versus dollar amount. And I think I caught in there, you could do just the tasting, separate from doing the tour, which some places you can do that, some places you can't. But this is a thing that at least some bourbon trailers will fatigue on, is that they've been through 3 production tours already. They're just here for the tasting. They want to know what your distillate tastes like, is what they're after. And so there's an opportunity for that. But I don't want to ever kind of diminish, like, go on the physical tour. Always go on the physical tour. If I'm a group, if I'm a Paducah Bourbon Society or somebody else, and I say, hey, we'd like to bring a group down. Do you guys have the means to accommodate that in a unique way, or is it just, okay, we're going to make sure we book for 15 people at one time?
The answer is the former. We're going to take care of you. Okay. We actually have on the website, if you've got a big group, you want to tour together, reach out, we'll make it happen. We've had several bourbon groups to the distillery before, and we try to do some behind the scenes stuff with them and show them the rick house, and maybe sample from a barrel, maybe, like, we'll see what happens. But we're where if nothing accommodating. And I think I do want to touch on something that you said that really resonates with us, because we think about it. We've been part of the leadership team. We talk about it a lot. Offering more unique and different types of experiences is really important to us. And I want to let everybody know that, like, one of our USPs in terms of the tours is that you get to hear, experience, see, our living history. It's not just the production facility. That's one aspect of it. And I don't know. It's really critical. Like, we've gone over a bumper sticker version of Casey's story and our story and how it came to be. And I want to encourage people. Like, my staff do such a great job. Like, they're versed. They really know what they're doing on both the tasting side, the tour side. They're invested. They're incredible, and they're going to give you an excellent experience. I have no doubt.
And I'll plug this just simply because of the history of Between the Rivers and moonshining in this area. There's probably like room for once every 5 years, like historical reenactment concept around what moonshining was like. Maybe there's nothing that kind of comes out of that from a consumption standpoint, but people love historical reenactments, and the people of this area are very attuned to moonshining specifically. And given the popularity of the TV show, anyways, I think there's something there, but that's also I'm from the outside looking in, and not even considering logistics and cost and all of those things that go into play with these special things, because all of these special tours require work, thought, and cost, and all of us don't have to think about that. We just say, hey, you should do this thing, and then wait for you to solve the problem from a financial perspective. And I'm gonna go way back to something that you mentioned earlier, as we're kind of closing in on time. You talked through 3 things that you think that are kind of growing trends or gaining popularity within whiskey, and blending was one, and you guys are already doing that, but blending it with a different intentionality for novel expressions, transparent sourcing, and then you mentioned finishing casks, and that I think you said that the latter was the one that you guys are most positioned to do. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct, actually. Finishing is such a different. I gave a talk at Bourbon Con not too long ago in Lexington, and it was just a great. I really like meeting with groups and just having sort of that insider perspective, honest to goodness. Let's talk about the bourbon industry, and any question you might want to ask, let's have it. And so we talked a little bit about the theme of my talk was about value. It's how do you create value in this space, and where is the value coming from, and where is it going to come from in the future? And I believe that value from bourbon in the past was the Jim Beam story. It was the Jack Daniel's story. And I know that's not bourbon. I'm not saying that, but that narrative of like the maker's story. It's like you were building casks and you were releasing these small batch expressions, and it was like that was your product lineup, and that was it. And those titans of industry, those founders, they told that story. And you're never going to be able to tell that story better than they have. The Beam and Makers and Woodford and Heaven Hill, they have casks that we just can't even imagine. And you're never going to catch them on that game. Like that's done. And so craft in response has tried to figure out and push the envelope and change the story of bourbon to be about these 3 pillars that I talked about. That sourcing is not taboo if you're transparent about it. Blending is way okay, actually. And it doesn't even matter if you're blending across spirit categories or you're blending across ages, that you're building, right? And then finishing casks is the same thing. I mean, 10 years ago, could you even imagine somebody talking about an Amurana finished cask of bourbon? Like, no, that was not even anybody's radar, right? And so craft has figured out, they've gotten crafty, pun intended. They've figured out how to create value and novelty and new experiences and expressions using these toolkits. And so that last one on finishing casks, why I think we might have a competitive advantage actually goes back to our barrel cut product. So when you're in the finishing and blending space, your narrative is that the distillate becomes a means to an end and not an end in of itself. And the old story was the distillate was an end in of itself. The new narrative is these are just tools that I'm going to use to create something. And we have a tool in our toolkit called barrel cut. And barrel cut has proven to be so incredibly perfectly malleable in a way that we can take that product and put it in, like for our double barrel product, we take that product and we put it in one of our used bourbon casks, one of the 7521-4s, and it comes out cinnamon and chocolate and cocoa nibs and fun like rum flavors. It's just wild what you get out of it. Mm-hmm. But we've taken that same product and we've put it in a wheat cask. And in wheat, it comes out as honey and caramel and vanilla and it's just light and fruity and flavor. It's just literally mouth-watering. So I think what we're learning as we go through this process, and we've tried other barrels, we did one in a honey cask. And the best way I could describe it is that it tasted not like honey finished whiskey. It tasted like the bees made the whiskey.
Okay.
Yeah. It was like, shut up and take my money. Like, it's just ridiculous, right? So I think what we're finding is that this tool that we have is actually turning out to be this great flavor component to build off of, and that we can pair it with other casks to make expressions, finished expressions that are unequivocal. Like you can't beat them.
And I like that, and you've identified something that I've thought, but I haven't quite framed it this way, at least until this moment. And blending, sourcing, finishing, these are all three primary topics. But from a heritage, you're right, you can't out heritage a heritage brand, right? Like they've been around forever, they have all these things, but they've been blending for a long time. But they're blending for uniformity, whereas craft is blending for novel expressions. And they've played a role in the sourcing game, but that was only to get rid of a glut of products. Because if we run back 15 or 20 years, there's a whole bunch of NDPs that were able to pick up Kentucky whiskey that sounds like it comes from heritage distilleries, but just people weren't buying the older age stated that didn't fit the flavor profile, whatever. And so you have these Bartons that hit the market and these Heaven Hills that hit the market and these Sazeracs that hit the market. And so they've played in these, but not from a differentiation, more from dealing with problems of their own process. But finishing feels like the place where all the heritage brands are playing catch up now, because whether it be because we noticed that, hey, all of these finishing techniques exist in Scotch, blending is okay, and sourcing is okay. This is a thing that's been in whiskey for hundreds of years. Let's explore it and see how it changes flavor. And you see these things happening, and then you see the folks like Maker's Mark coming out with, French Oak, and then you've got all of these other heritage brands that are playing catch up on the testing of it. Craft has an agility to it to be able to try out new things, because the scales of economy are incredibly different. And I'll ask maybe like, it sounds like you guys are playing with your own casks and you played with some honey as well. Is there a cask on the market that you haven't gotten to play with yet that you'd like, I would like to see what our distillate would do in that cask?
Oh, 100%. We have some just incredible friends at Oak and Flame in Leroy, Illinois. They run this just incredible bourbon tasting experience retail shop. Highly recommend anybody in that area. Please go check them out. Jen and Scott are the proprietors there. We have talked to them about doing an Amburana finished product. And I know that Amburana can be very divisive because it's a case of a little bit goes a long way. You need to be really careful about what you're doing with it. In trying to develop what cask we're going to use for it, we're really sure we're going to do the bourbon or we're going to do the barrel cut. We had a chance to taste some other distilleries, standard, bourbon mash bill, and then that mash bill finished in Amburana. So you get a chance to see what it was actually doing to the expression.
The impact, yeah.
And I can tell you with 100% certainty that when we finish barrel cut in Amburana, it will be a unicorn. Like, it will not last long. It's going to be incredible.
And I agree, Amburana is one of the most divisive finishes that's out there right now. Everybody either loves it or hate it. And I'm kind of in the place where I want one of two things. I want it at extremes. I want it to be subtle, and I think, Barrel did a really good job with their Amburana finish where it was really subtle, and I thought it was great. Or I want to go to the other end of the spectrum, and I want it to beat me over the head because it'll be a fantastic Christmas drink, right? And it's something that non-whiskey drinkers will pick up and enjoy because to me, it becomes maybe a gentleman's version of Fireball, and that sounds a little insulting. It's not, though. I'm just saying, it's like it's grown up, not a cinnamon whiskey, but there's so much uniqueness to it that exists. And maybe one more innovation question, right? There's this growing segment in American single malts. Is this a thing that you guys are considering participating in and getting into the American single malt category, or are we just going to kind of stick with bourbon?
I don't know. We've got the equipment to do it. Our primary workhorse still, like I said, is a traditional pot with an offset 4-plate column and a condenser, defumator and a condenser to the right of that. We can bypass that column. And the people who I have talked to that are operating successfully in this space of single malts say that is critical, that the alcohols for single malt are heavier, that you do not want to reflux and redistill them in one pass, that you want to do a traditional stripping run and maintain that integrity of those alcohols. So we're positioned to do that. But I would say that, this is the perpetual problem of any endeavor is you've got finite resources and infinite possibilities. And the more successful you get, the more possibilities that seem to come your way. So you have to develop an ability to say no so that you can stay focused on the vision. And I don't know that single malt's there for us, but maybe.
Yeah. And, most people think, cost is linear. And so it's just the cost of doing the thing, but it's also the lost opportunity cost of the time you spend mashing and distilling this single malt is time you didn't get to spend mashing and distilling any one of your other proven resources. And so now you have significant lost opportunity cost cleaning. There's a lot more to it than just the cost of the distillation run itself, right? But it's a question I'm always going to ask because it is kind of a growing segment in the North American marketplace. And I don't know that I've asked this yet, but how did you get involved in this, right? Like the Jones family has this heritage to it. How does Cody Turner get wrapped up in Western Kentucky Distillery?
Yeah, so I actually went to high school here in Christian County many years ago. Left there and went to WKU for my undergrad and graduate. I started a marketing consulting firm after I finished up my MBA and worked with after I finished up my MBA, started that marketing firm and then ended up teaching afterwards in the marketing department as an adjunct, teaching digital marketing, social media marketing, and digital advertising. Well, one of my students that graduated ended up creating his own marketing firm we ended up working on a project together and ended up merging our companies. And then a couple of years after that, we started the Bowling Green Bourbon and Brew Fest. And so Peg and AJ were working with Lewis Communications in Nashville, had finished up that work, and were looking for a local firm to take over their social media and their digital marketing. Found us through the Brew Fest. We start working together. And then in 2020, obviously, what was it? Let me get the timing right. Yeah, 2020, the pandemic hits, right? Mm-hmm. Literally sold the Brewfest March of 2020, was overseas in Edinburgh, landed 2 days later. They closed international flights, and had gotten a call from Peg about needing to shut the doors because they were a non-essential business. Finally get settled, get a very different call like a week later saying, hey, I think we can make sanitizer. Mm-hmm. This is all like rapid fire stuff. And she's asking, can you help us get this online? And I think within 48 hours, I had a full e-commerce order fulfillment, digital ad platform, everything running and going. And we ended up actually becoming one of the leading, certainly top 2, maybe top 3 distilleries selling hand sanitizer throughout the pandemic 2021. And we were very, very successful. We ended up giving away a ton of sanitizer to first responders and teachers and schools, and people supported us, and we took very good care of them. And then after that sated in 22, started having a conversation with Peg and AJ about a partnership, and we came to terms, and here we are.
You know, and it seems like both yesterday and a lifetime away that that we have this 2020 situation.
Even the dates right. I'm thinking, what's this?
It's like we're approaching 4 years, but also yesterday, and my brain is sort of broken on it, and we're pushing up on time. I want to give you the last couple seconds here. I've still got an oodle of questions, so we're probably going to have to do this again, hopefully, here as we kind of get maybe more towards the middle part of the year and you get through some of the releases and you tease some more of the other releases. Give me the, places where I can find Casey Jones, whether it be, e-commerce, website, social media, all of those things. Where do I need to be plugged in to understand everything that you guys are doing?
Yeah. So one of the things associated with the partnership that I wanted us to tackle was, the vertical integration, the distillation equipment, et cetera, Rick House, we did that. But the other piece of it was distribution. And so I've been working much to the chagrin of my lovely wife, far too much on pushing product in other states. But we're now in several markets. So we're available in 3 provinces in Canada, New Brunswick, Calgary, and BC. And we're now in California and Arizona and Texas and Wisconsin and Illinois and New York and New Jersey and Georgia and obviously Tennessee. And I'm working to add DC, Delaware, and Maryland. So we're in quite a few markets. I just finished putting up our new DTC e-commerce platform, so you can order from us, air quotes, directly. It's not really technically directly. We ship product to a DC retailer and a California retailer, then they ship to you. It's laws,
3-tier system,
something else.
Yeah.
But we're working like hell to get about as everywhere as we can manage to support being at any given time. Yeah.
Cool. So that's awesome. Like I said, I super appreciate the time that you were able to give me. You're traveling all over the place trying to spread the good word of Casey Jones and the whiskey that you guys are making. And so time is the one thing that you can't create more of. And I'm always appreciative whenever folks agree to hop on. We obviously need to, I think we need to continue this conversation. And I promise in the next 3 months, given my work calendar as well, I will make the 45-minute drive between here and there. It's really not that far. It's just, every single time that I go to the airport, because I have to go to
Yeah,
Nashville to get
yeah.
any reasonable flight, I pass by, I'm like, I keep meaning to do it, and I just haven't done it in the last couple of years. So that's on me, but I'll see you guys soon. Thank you so much, Cody, for hopping on and spending an hour talking about Casey Jones.
Well, I want to tell you thank you, and again, your viewership maybe not know this, but I had a major boo boo. You had actually planned for us to meet. That was 2 days ago, and it was on the calendar and everything. And I just completely missed it. And look at this, John's being the consummate gentleman. I mean, you, man.
That's not, I don't normally get that particular praise, so thank you very much. But everybody's got to be flexible. This podcast thing is something extra for you, and it's something extra for me. And so I try to work it between my work schedule, and you work it between your work schedule, where you do the things that actually generate revenue. So I get it, life happens, and
Well,
if there's somebody in front of you that's wanting to purchase something or see something, go talk to them before you go talk to the guy that's speaking against a wall in his office,
Well, I appreciate you, and thank you for letting us have a chance to touch base with your audience and talk about our story. And I definitely
Platforms
appreciate the conversation.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Embellish Pod. If you enjoyed this, please leave a review on whatever platform that you're consuming this on. Leave a comment if possible. Hit me up on social media on TikTok or Instagram using Embellish Pod, or give me a follow so you can keep up with what's going on here. I can be found at www.embellishpod.com with all of my links, accounts, and contact details. Thanks for stopping by.